Getting out of an abusive relationship early makes a huge difference.
And I'm proud to say I did come in as a victim, but I am a survivor.
Then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us. And I got excited. And I was like, there's my mom. And then he didn't stop.
I'm trying to keep it together, I said. I gave in to the tears. And I hated that.
It's not necessarily the easiest process. It's not necessarily the prettiest process, but it is the most effective process. Like, you can do this. I'm going to tell you 100% you can do this, and you're so worth it to do this.
I'm sure losing any child is a real arrow through your heart, but you know, she was great. She was a friend and a family member and our daughter.
It feels just as good the 10th time as it did the first time, to have one of your citizens that you're out there protecting walk up and tell you thank you.
There is one thing stronger in me than fear, and that's my determination. Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, the creator and host of I Need Blue. If this is your first time joining us, we are happy you are here. If you would like to hear other stories or you have a story to submit, visit www.ineedblue.net. Please note, I Need Blue does contain stories which feature graphic content and could be triggering. Please seek help if needed, and remember, you always come first. My friends thought I would give them cancer. I wore gloves when I changed my 2-year-old sister's diaper because the waste was radioactive. This is Maya's story. She was 13 when her sister was diagnosed with ALL, Acute Lymphoblastic Leukemia. She remembers the moment, the pandemonium surrounding the announcement her sister had cancer. As a teenage sibling, Maya was thrust into a journey which left her confused, fearful, lonely, and feeling deprived. And those are just a few of the many emotions siblings feel when they cope with a sister or brother who has cancer. Maya is now 21 and her sister is 9. She is going to share her story to help comfort others. When I first met with Maya, I was drawn to the emotional details she shared. She has beautiful eyes, and as she spoke, she let me into the world she witnessed, watching this younger life and almost death of her sister. Maya, I appreciate your courage to share your story and provide the eyes and ears as to what it is like for a sibling on the sidelines watching their brother or sister battle cancer. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know that your story is going to resonate with a lot of families out there and provide a lot of helpful information. Let's take a minute to talk about your childhood and what it was like before your sister's diagnosis. So say up to age 12, you had school and friends. So that way, the audience, we can understand how things were before, and then it gives us a better understanding after the diagnosis.
It was kind of a normal childhood. One of those, you have a big family, always hanging out, spending time with each other. So I was already really close with my extended family, luckily. We all lived in a relatively same area, so at least within an hour of each other maximum. We lived in the Orlando area, so a lot of going to Disney, going to water parks, going to different pools and such. It was kind of nice, you know, just calm. We were getting adjusted. My mother just married my stepdad, so that was an adjustment period. But it was relatively quick and went relatively smoothly.
That's good. You know what? You sound really fortunate that you had so much extended family so close, because nowadays a lot of families are in different states.
My family came from Puerto Rico and they all lived in New York. When my grandparents moved down to Florida, everybody eventually moved down to Florida. We've always had kind of a, I guess you could say like a clan mentality of, you know, we're here for each other regardless. It's not oh, I haven't talked to my cousin in months. I talked to my cousin on the phone last week. And we were really lucky for that.
That's awesome. You had a great family foundation. So, what was it like with your friends in school?
Honestly, I was pretty awkward. I didn't have a ton of friends in school. I had some close ones. I had my best friend, and then my other best friend moved away around that time. That was adjustment in itself, and I was going to a new middle school, so trying to figure out who I was, what I liked to do. So I only had a few friends, and mostly we were all very academically inclined. We would talk about school, different things that we learned outside of school. It was very, very nerdy.
Did you have hobbies? Like I did roller skating and things like that.
Yeah, I drew a lot. I was really into sketching. During the time I really got into anime, my art style changed completely during that time. I was just obsessed, always sitting in front of the computer, trying to find different references to draw. I was a big avid reader then, but at that time, I still am now, but during that time, I was falling off of the reading side and more into the arts and painting and drawing and all of that.
So, did your art kind of help you cope with your, to use your word, awkwardness that you were experiencing at that age?
Honestly, not at all. Art kids were probably the more, I guess you could say, unpopular, but I didn't really care about that. It was one of those weird things, kids are like, well, that's what I draw. You can't draw that. It was really awkward.
I have a younger sister, and we're 2 years apart. And you and your sister Elizabeth are how many years apart?
11?
11. Okay. For me and my sister, we had some of the same friends. We played Barbies, we played with the neighborhood kids, things like that. Is it safe to assume that with that 11-year difference, you all probably didn't connect on that level?
Yeah, I was excited for her to get older so we could play. I did really like taking care of her and like watching movies of her, and I would play with her and her little baby bouncer. So there was some playing, but it wasn't on the same level. You know what I mean?
Right. What is your favorite childhood memory?
For my 8th birthday, we went to Disney's Wilderness Lodge and we went camping. I think that was my first time camping, if I remember correctly. That was very big. I'm very big on Disney, so I was gifted a Hidden Mickey guidebook when Disney used to be really big on the Hidden Mickeys. That was probably one of my favorite memories.
So thank you for sharing that about your childhood. Now let's move on to talk a little bit about Elizabeth. Can you describe the moment you knew something was wrong? Were you told right away about your sister's cancer, or?
I knew something was wrong with her health. She was constantly at the doctor's almost every day. We thought it was a bad cold, fever. Then we thought she had asthma. She was on a nebulizer for a few days. And it was one of those, we were just running so many tests. I was always very close with my stepdad, my mom, and my sister. So I went to them with all those appointments. I didn't go with them to the children's hospital in Orlando. That was when they found out. I just wanted to stay home with my grandmother and just spend some time with just her. Before they even left the hospital, they gave my grandmother a call, told her so she would be aware before they told me. And I remember her handing me the phone, crying and sobbing and running down the hallway to go to her room. And I was I was really confused, but they told me right away that she had cancer. Honestly, I didn't know what fully cancer entailed. I only was exposed to cancer in TV shows and stuff. I was definitely very, very shocked. I was also very confused. And in my brain, I'm like, well, it could be worse because I didn't know. The worst to me was she was dying. And in my brain, I didn't fully realize that cancer slowly does kill you, I was just like, well, they know what she has and now they can help her. And then I went back to playing video games.
I often wonder how somebody at age 12 processes the word cancer. Your grandmother basically told you the news. And then what was it like when you finally heard the news from your parents?
My grandmother didn't tell me the news. She kind of just handed me the phone and walked away crying. And then on the phone, my parents told me the news, and it was just very like, oh, okay. And then my mom was like, how are you feeling? And I was like, I'm fine, because again, I didn't fully know what cancer entailed, and I was just like, well, if they know what she has, then they can help her. And that was it.
When was the next time you saw your sister after you got the news from your parents?
It was, it all happened in kind of a rush. I don't remember if she stayed at the hospital with one of my parents and then my other parent came down and got me, or I believe they might have all come home just to get what we needed, clothes, things like that, our bags packed. They weren't sure whether or not they wanted me fully there the first night, but they gave me the choice. They always gave me the choice on things. I think I was just like, well, I want to go and see exactly like what's going on, you know? So I went up there. I think it was that night or either the next morning.
So you went up to the children's hospital.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a place where families can live there then so they can be near their child who is going through cancer treatment? How does that work?
Yeah, it really depended. Most of the time, you can stay in the hospital room that the child is in. If it's a smaller hospital room, then you're typically only there for maybe 2 to 3 days. But they do have extended stay hospital rooms where they know that the patient will be there for an extended amount of time. That could be anywhere between 4 days to weeks and sometimes even months. During that time, I believe we were in a short stay because nobody was really sure what the next steps were, And then eventually we got moved to an extended stay where we had a futon and enough room on the floor for an air mattress.
So that became home.
In a way, it was really odd. It became home for my parents, I feel like, more than it did become home for me. During the time that my sister was in the hospital, in and out, either if it was a short amount of time, I would go with them. But if it were extended amounts of time, I might stay for a few days with my family, whether that's like my aunt, my grandparents, my friend, my best friend even, or I had to go up there to the hospital. My mom was a teacher during all of this, and she taught at the same school that I attended. So there was a time where we were commuting from the hospital to school.
Okay. So your sister is 2. What was it like to see your sister? Did you feel like she was really fragile?
At that point, she didn't look much different physically. So at first I was like, yeah, well, this is how she's been the past few days. And then once I learned and I was at the hospital and a few representatives talked to me and put into words what cancer meant and stuff, I felt like she was just dainty, where I was always very careful with her being so small. And so even then I was just like, I was scared to move her in case it hurt her just to even be touched.
That had to be hard.
Yeah.
How was your sister during this? Because you don't really know anything at 2, right?
Yeah. We were honestly very lucky that she was so young because she didn't know any different. So her mind was strong, which is half the battle, and if you have a strong mind, then you can pretty much get through anything. She adjusted quickly. She didn't know any different. So she was still strong. She was still peppy. She talked. She tried to move a lot, she was fighting it and giving it a good fight.
Yes. Sometimes the not knowing creates strength. In the beginning, those first few months when you heard the word cancer and it started to be explained to you what it meant, who was there for you? Who was there when you needed someone?
I would say my mom and my stepdad, they were definitely there for me. In a way, my whole family was there, but I think they didn't help me as much as I needed because I didn't allow them to help me as much as I needed. For example, what I mean by that is I didn't want any distraction from my sister. In my mind, I was perfectly healthy. So why do I need any extra help? Why do I need any extra attention when they should really just be thinking about my sister? Even though everybody tried to help me and try to be like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? I didn't let them. I was just kind of blowing them off like, oh, I feel fine. Like, everything's fine here. Like, I'm doing good at school. I'm healthy and I'm fed. So I'm good.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people feel the same way you did during that time. And later on, I'm curious to see, looking back, if you wished you would have had more help, because the longer it goes on, the more we're affected. Outside of the family, who was the first person that you talked to, and was it right away?
I feel like I blocked off, and it all moved so quickly, so it was kind of a whirlwind. I feel like, knowing how I am now, who I was back then, I told my best friend. My best friend and my best friend's parents were close to my mom. My mom actually worked with her parents. So they already knew of the situation, and so they were able to put it into words that best fit what their daughter would understand as well. So I didn't have to fully try to explain what was going on. She kind of had an idea of what was going on, but it was more of like the gritty details of what I was going through, what my sister was going through, that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything specific within that conversation that stood out that you would like to share?
Honestly, I don't remember it fully. She was always very caring and a very good listener. I'm pretty sure it just went through a venting, I just said everything that was on my mind, and she was like, I understand that. Would you feel better if you came over here?
That's great that somebody was there to offer that to you. What do you wish you could do to help during that time, but you couldn't?
I wished a lot of things, honestly. I think my most consistent wish was that my sister wasn't sick. And if someone in my family had to be sick, I wished I was the one that was sick. I'm not sure why. I was actually a really big hypochondriac leading up to this. And once I was introduced to cancer, I was like, well, there's nothing for me to be scared of anymore. I wished I could take the pain, or that she didn't have pain. As a child, I wished I could help financially even, because whether or not my parents even told me, I could see that it was hard on us pretty much having to eat out a lot of the time that we were in the hospital, or hospital bills, insurance, things like that. So I wished I could help out in whatever way I could. I remember I stopped wanting to ask for things, but then I also asked for things because I wanted to feel normal.
And this is still around 13, 14, 15 years of age?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot to have on your shoulders. Knowing that you couldn't do those things, financially help and take the cancer away from your sister, how did that leave you feeling?
I guess I felt like I didn't have a place in the situation. At that point, going from wanting to be around my whole family all the time, I wanted to remove myself from my immediate family and either spend time with my grandparents or with my aunt, because I didn't want to get in the way, and I didn't want to directly contribute to, another meal eating out, or, she needs something, or, this, and this, And so I tried to stay back as much as possible so I wouldn't feel like I was directly contributing to it.
That's got to be so hard, because we need our parents. But you took on this wanting to be unselfish, if you will.
And that way they could give her their full emotional and mental attention rather than me.
During that time, though, you still needed support, you emotionally, because you're still processing all of these things as the sibling. What did you do? How did you get through that?
I don't think I did, honestly. Again, like I said, my family was all very close, so I can't say that my grandparents didn't dote on me, because they did. They took a lot of care of me, or my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, they were all there emotionally, but I didn't really want them to feel burdened. I feel like a lot of us do whenever we go through something hard, we just kind of don't talk about it. We don't think about it. At least we try not to think about it. And then we just lock it away, and then it resurfaces 10 years later,
Did that feeling inside of you grow or become more intense as your sister's situation became more dire?
Yes and no. I was adjusting to not explaining how I felt and not communicating. Not communicating didn't become harder, but trying to lock in those emotions when I saw my sister struggling became harder. The immediate reactions to things became harder and harder to tone down.
Can you give an example?
Once I was changing her diaper because I wanted to help out. This was in the hospital. I really wanted to help out. And I had to wear a mask and gloves to change her diaper because of the chemo treatment making her, I guess, her pee radioactive and toxic. I thought I shouldn't have to wear gloves or put all this protective gear on just to change a diaper. And there were times where after she was growing out of a crib and she could lay in an actual bed, she was still so small and the bed swallowed her up. She had an infection in her port, which is where they access for the chemo, and it was so painful on her, and this wasn't even the cancer at this time, it was an infection in her chest, that she couldn't even move to look at anyone. She just was frozen and crying to where it hurt her even to cry. I felt so bad for her that I didn't want to react so she wouldn't see me react or so my parents wouldn't see me react. There was a little cafe down the hall, a rest area where there was chairs, big windows, free coffee, free snacks, and I just kind of started sitting over there.
Maya, I can't imagine. I was wondering if you're comfortable sharing the progression. Number one, I don't know much about this leukemia. So if you wanted to take a minute to just educate us, that's fine. But as the sibling, if you're comfortable sharing what you witnessed, what you saw, how this leukemia kind of started to take over your sister and how you processed that.
Yeah. ALL, or acute lymphocytic, also known as lymphoblastic leukemia, directly attacks the white blood cells. And so we know that white blood cells are what protect us against sicknesses, colds, flus. They're kind of the attacker cells, right? With her having less white blood cells than what she needed, you could imagine that bruises were just constant on her. And there was a time where just not a rough touch or anything, even just helping her sit up could bruise her. She went from being very, very healthy and happy, like a happy little 2-year-old baby, to crying all the time, more than a child should cry because of the pain. Bruised. The chemo made her slowly lose her hair. I remember I would help wash her hair, and just putting shampoo in her hair, I'd pull my hand back and her hair would be covering my hand, all falling out. Slowly her stopping movement so much where she's just laid in her bed, or hooked up to all of these wires. And when she did have good days, her immunities weren't good enough that we couldn't even take her outside to get some sun sometimes. So she was becoming really pale and weak from not being able to physically move that much.
As a mom, I remember by age 2, they're running around. They're getting into stuff, driving you nuts. You have child-proof the whole house, right? And that's what your parents were expecting. But instead, they're having to help their child stay out of pain. And dainty, you said the word dainty. I can't imagine what that's like for a family. And I appreciate you sharing what you just did to kind of give us a glimpse of what you went through. Your sister is brought home. Can you tell us at what age and at what point in this process did she get well enough to go home?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly the increments of when she was well enough to go home or what that looked like. It really depended on what her doctor said. Of course, my parents didn't want to be in the hospital that much. As you can imagine, overnights in hospitals can be very expensive and add up quick. But no matter the cost, of course, my parents wanted to make sure she was, first and foremost, fine to leave the hospital. On days that we knew it was coming up that she would be coming home, I would stay home or I would get picked up, driven home regardless. I needed to sanitize everything. Everything had to be clean, sterile. To prepare for her coming home, we had to mop the whole house, wipe all the doors, the door handles, clean all surfaces, clean everything that she touched, do all the laundry, do all the sheets, the blankets. Even we had a leather couch, even disinfect the couch. I became a really good cleaner and kind of a germaphobe, honestly. That's one of my biggest things that have stuck with me. And so I just had to keep everything clean. That's how it was leading up to everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that created anxiety, knowing that everything had to stay so clean all the time.
Yeah, for sure. It really did. It's one of those things where now I'll touch a handle and my skin burns after touching a handle because all I can think about, when is the last time this was disinfected? And it definitely has laid long-term effects on my family, my immediate family, my parents, me. My sister, not so much. She doesn't remember having to do that. So we had to tell her to stop with the germs, Even now with my marriage too, there's a lot of differences of, no, please don't do that. You're dirty. Like, that's gross. You have to disinfect that. Or when's the last time you disinfected your phone? Or did you put on any hand sanitizer? Did you wash your hands before you ate? Did you wipe down the counters? Even disinfecting the sink has become a consistent thing for me, even now.
How did did that just amplify your need to disinfect?
Honestly, it didn't, because for once, everybody's disinfecting.
Oh.
I already had hand sanitizer all in the car. I already had disinfectant wipes. It was, please put on hand sanitizer after you go out anywhere. The second you get in the car, put on hand sanitizer. The second you get home, wash your hands. It helped a little bit, honestly, with the germaphobe in me, even with the masks. But now we're lucky that COVID is not, the numbers aren't as high anymore, So even now, though, with COVID, it felt like it kind of set me back. During COVID, I was fine. But after, while it's calming down now, it's setting me back a bit to when the height of the cancer, it's like, well, there's too many people here and this is dirty. Nobody's sanitizing this, and it's more of an issue now than it was even in the height of COVID.
Wow, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. You like to go to Disney and theme park. So how do you manage that?
It's one of those things where the germs don't bother me just existing. It's if it gets to me, or like I see anybody in my immediate family or whoever I'm going with, if I see that they touch something gross or something that bothers me, because I'm like, you're going to get sick and then you're going to have to take all this medicine. It's more so I've become the friend that always has hand sanitizer. It's, oh, we're on this ride here, like, just put on hand sanitizer before you eat, or wash your hands before you eat. Don't touch your face, I feel like I carry sometimes a diaper bag just for the theme park, just for me, snacks, hand sanitizer, wipies, rags, things like that. Just personal hygiene is the biggest thing for me. So it's not really looking at somewhere and being like, that's dirty. Like, I can go in the New York City subways and not really care as long as I know that my hands are clean.
Oh, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to ask you as you were talking if maybe part of it is you feel that your sister's illness came from germs. Like, maybe if she would have washed her hands more, maybe this, maybe that, she wouldn't have gotten sick. So I didn't know if you had any of those thoughts.
No, honestly, I never, with it being a blood attacking cancer, nobody can really say exactly where it came from. It wasn't like for example, like skin cancer, you could say, maybe don't spend a lot of time in the sun, don't do this, avoid these products on your skin,
Right.
It wasn't that as much as now it's more of a byproduct of cancer, and it being, please don't do this or else you could get really sick, even if that's a stomach virus.
Right. When your sister came home, do you know how old she was?
It really depends, honestly. She wasn't in the hospital for too long the first time, so she was still 2. The amount of times that she was back and forth from the hospital and home was probably through the years between 2 and 4 years were more significant amounts of times, cooling down into when she was 5 years old, 6 years, and then now to 7 to 9 years old, which is a lot a lot calmer, you know?
So she has been in and out of hospitals then for about 7 years, starting from age 2. When she came home, you had to do the cleaning, but was there anything else that had to change, whether it be furniture moved or a hospital bed brought in or anything like that to make it more comfortable and accommodating for her?
Not necessarily. My parents' bedroom was also her bedroom. It was more so making it to where the walk spaces were wider, just so she could get in and out easily, so you could bring in bags, medicine, things like that easily. There was a time where she wasn't getting the nutrients that she needed. She had to have a vitamin bag attached to her port. And like I said earlier, that's how they access her chemotherapy. That's how she gets all her medicine, through the port on her chest. With the nutrients bag, it was hard because connecting the port to the bag, there was a long cord attached to it. And it had to be elevated, but we didn't have one of those, like the IV bag holders on the wheels, you know, that you roll around, that you see in movies, you know, we didn't have that at home. So it was just a lot of physical things instead of permanent changes. So for example, I would carry the nutrients bag behind her and hold it above her head, so then it would, you know, gravity, and so she could actually get the nutrients. So it was a lot of walking changes and personal changes rather than furniture and home.
Got you. I understand. You are her sister, but you also became a caregiver.
Yeah, I definitely helped my parents a lot with medicine and all of that.
What was hardest about being a caregiver?
The hardest is you're never taught how to do it. You don't go through the school to learn how to be a nurse. You have to do it. That's it. With my parents, I would ask for help. Of course, if they wanted me to do something, and they always gave me a choice, you don't have to help us with this. The ages between 14 and 15. I was a very mature child and I didn't mind helping. I had to learn quickly and ask my parents for a lot of help at first and make sure I'm doing it right. A lot of it has been the second guessing. Is this the right amount of medicine, of this medicine? Is this the exact time? I learned not to really care too much about blood. It never bothered me at that point. I was kind of used to seeing different, the IV, all of that. So it was just the lack of training and the force of training at the same time.
How would you describe your new normal back then?
I was always somewhere, if that makes sense. I always had an overnight bag. So even if I was staying with my aunts and my grandparents who live right next door to each other for weeks, I always had a bag packed just in case. And I got really good at packing really quickly. The normal was going back and forth to hospitals, going to different houses, still going to school, trying to adjust to social life as a middle schooler. It was frantic and quick and fast paced. Then now that like everything's slowing down, I don't like slowing down. You know, I like to have my whole day booked out.
Can you share with us how your sister is now?
Oh, she's a firecracker. She, luckily, with her being so young, she either doesn't remember a lot of the cancer, and that is partly because of age and because of the chemotherapy affecting her memory. She knows what happened, but she, as a 9-year-old now, she doesn't remember the pain too much, which we're all glad for. It's hard to think about someone that you love just living, getting phantom pain, phantom procedures done, because it's very invasive, you know, to your mind and your body going through something like that. We're lucky in a way that she doesn't remember that she was so young, but now as a 9-year-old, everything is good. Even though she doesn't remember her treatment, she still can't remember math that she learned yesterday. She can't remember words that she's seen a million times on paper. She has a lot of learning disabilities, you know, that we're working through. Other than that, emotionally, mentally, she's very, very active, excitable. She loves talking. She loves hanging out. She likes playing video games with everybody. She always wants to spend time with people, which probably is, again, a byproduct of the cancer treatment with her one, always being around people, and two, she craves playing even though she was in the hospital inside and out and didn't really have a traditional childhood of making friends, going through kindergarten, going through first and second grade, you know. One of the biggest things that we're navigating is giving her the social aspect without her being able to have the social aspect because her immunities are so low. She still can't go to school without getting very, very sick. And especially with the pandemic, it's very dangerous for her still out there.
I think that you're a very special lady. And I was going to ask you how you found ways to make Elizabeth's, childhood special.
Yes, Disney as a company is, like all companies, there's good and bads, right? But one of the best things that Disney does is they host cancer events for kids. We've been to a lot of events in our time during her treatment when she was able to, of course, with immunities, that were hosted by Disney, and Mickey and Minnie Mouse were dressed up and you take pictures. They'd have food and the princesses will be there and there'll be performances. There was a time they always had a Christmas special. All the kids got bikes. There was all these events that paired with Disney, and those events definitely brought back more magic and more normalcy and more childhood things that she missed out on. We were able to have passes, and for a while where her immunities were doing so well, we were able to bring her to Disney and go to Epcot and Magic Kingdom, and there's Make-A-Wish, and we took her on a Disney cruise, and she loves Disney cruise, with it being so immersive in the Disney experience. I mean, the pictures move in the hallways like it's Harry Potter. Characters walk around the ship and they greet her, and it's magical. Whenever someone is going through this, regardless of whether or not they're a child or an adult or a teenager, you need to bring back the magic in their life to give them some sort of hope or some sort of brightness to look to when everything's hurting, no matter what they're going through. She loves the beach, Those were magical things,
I love how you use the word magic. It's not something that we think about as adults too much, but you're so right. I think that it's great that she had those opportunities and that she was able to go. How fun.
Organization called Runway for Hope, a charity auction. It was a fashion show that was also, all the kids, they would give them a full outfit from Bloomingdale's and they could dress up in whatever they want, and they walk the runway. And all of these kids are all going through some sort of terminal illness. They're all walking the runway and with characters, with models, with Miss Universes, and they get to dress up and be the stars. She loved that because she loved dressing up anything. She was always wearing something fluffy and sparkly or white or pink or whatever, They did her makeup, so she had fun, bright yellow feather eyelashes. Not only does it help the kids, it helps the families too. We were all able to dress up, really nice tables outside of the runway during the auction, and you wear fancy clothes and you eat hors d'oeuvres, and it's all really, really nice. And that was one of the biggest organizations that helped her mentality and us. It gave us time to get out and not just be at home or in the hospital.
And what was the name of that again?
Runway for Hope.
Runway for Hope. Awesome. I love that there are so many organizations and resources out there that really invest in, to use your word, bringing the magic back for the children. That is awesome. I want to end by talking about your strength and desire to help. And that's why you wanted to share your story on the podcast, because there's not a lot of voices advocating for siblings who are dealing with a sibling who has cancer. So I want to give you some time to share whatever message you would like to share with our audience.
So I thank you for this time, honestly. One of the biggest things is everybody goes through something that is life-changing. And cancer may sound big for someone listening, or it may sound minuscule for someone listening, but that doesn't make what anyone's going through less important. It's all about interpretation. If it is important in your life, then it is important. I want people to recognize that it is okay to go through something. It is okay to have a life-changing event. It is okay that your normal is not what it used to be. You can do it. Another thing is, for all the siblings of cancer patients, just because you're not in the front lines doesn't mean that your family doesn't care about you. I promise they're worrying as much about you, but they don't want to scare you. They're worried about you, they want you to be happy, and they love you, and it's hard because whenever you have a sibling that is going through something difficult, it's kind of pulling your emotions because you're missing out on a lot of the love you feel. You feel like it's less than compared to someone who's going through a sickness, but you also care about them. And I imagine a lot of people feel guilt for that. The least that we can do, I feel like, as a society together is to just be kind to each other, because everybody that we meet, everybody that we pass on the street is going through something. The world cannot be the best, it cannot be the most kindest, but if we can at least be kind to each other, then hopefully it spreads. Saying some things about cancer, it's hard because a lot of people are like, well, why would you say that? People think it's insensitive to talk about how someone else feels when someone close to them is going through, quote unquote, much worse. And I'm not downplaying my sister's sickness at all. It's that everybody matters.
And I completely understand that. And I think that's why it's really important that you share your message, because you're human.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this has been a great opportunity. It's not often that I get to talk about cancer in a way where it's both educational and emotional and inspiring. I want people to know that they're not alone, regardless of their role, whether they are the patient, the parent, the sibling, even the cousin or the aunt. Everybody is affected by a sickness, and it's not just the immediate people. Everybody matters.
That is a beautiful message. Maya, I want to thank you for being you. You have some special gifts. And I am thankful to have met you, thankful to have connected, and really happy that you are here today. So true. Everybody does matter. Thank you so much, Maya. This is Jen Lee with the I Need Blue podcast. Thank you for listening today. You can listen to this story and others at www.ineedblue.net. And remember, you are stronger than you think.